Welcome to the Silent Thinking Podcast, a space to slow down, breathe, and reconnect. Today, I'm reading from When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister by Dave Roberts and Patty Furino. Just listen and let the stillness support you. Chapter 2, A Long Island Epiphany. I took some time to catch my breath after the excitement surrounding the Beyond Words conference and the magic of the trip to Old Forge. While taking pause, I also thought about whether or not I should go to Long Island in November for Ron Villano's presentation. I ultimately decided, based on all that happened, I would reach out to the Reverend Patty Furino. I called and she told me that she was volunteering at the event. She was genuinely excited that I reached out and was extremely warm and easygoing. In fact, she told me that I could drop the Reverend stuff and address her as either Pat or Patty. I expressed my thanks, explaining that I was always taught to use formal titles with members of the clergy. In hindsight, Pat's informal manner took our relationship to another level. To my surprise, when I asked about the nearest hotel accommodations, she immediately offered the extra bedroom in her home. Little did I know that staying in her home would be the catalyst for a truly profound, spiritually transformative experience. Ron Villano's November 11th show now seemed to be a part of a bigger plan, the details of which were still unknown to me. During the next month and a half, Patty and I discussed my travel plans to Long Island, different places that she wanted to show me, and Ron Villano's event. My primary concern, which I shared repeatedly with Pat, was the reaction of her husband Marco to having me stay in their home. I was conscious of not violating any boundaries created by the sanctity of Patty and Marco's marriage. In preparation for spending the weekend with them in their home, I was initially concerned with only the logistics and boundaries. On the other hand, my wife Sherry wasn't concerned about me staying at the home of a woman that she never met, because throughout my life I have had several close platonic female friendships. We have trusted each other unconditionally throughout our many years of marriage. On November 11, 2010, I flew from Syracuse into the JFK airport. My flight took off without a hitch, and I actually arrived more than a half hour early. I immediately called Patty, expecting that I would be waiting in the airport for a bit. To my surprise, she answered her phone giggling. Unbelievably, she had just parked the car in the airport when her phone rang. She later explained that she left her home early with the intention to do an errand, and as she approached the light by her home, intuition pushed her to head right to the airport. Patty later shared that there was a higher force directing this day for both of us from the start. On the drive from the airport, Patty took the scenic route and suggested that we stop at Jones Beach State Park. She explained that this was one of the special places she wanted to show me on her Long Island. The weather was warm and the sun was shining bright, so we strolled along the boardwalk to get acquainted. We walked for a bit, then stopped at a bench to talk while enjoying the beauty of the seashore. We took note of the seagulls circling over our heads. I joked, saying they're probably waiting for the right opportunity to poop on my head. Patty had a different perspective, suggesting that maybe they are attracted to our energy. This was a foreign concept to me. I never considered that animals could sense human energy or even be drawn to it. Patty began to share some of her background, and I asked if I believe in a higher spiritual influence. I immediately responded with names of authors and speakers that I'm acquainted with who have an understanding of spirituality. At the time, I did not recognize the depth of Patty's knowledge and awareness. We made plans to return home with enough time for me to eat, shower, and get ready for Ron Villano's Evan at the Long Island Marriott. Upon arrival, we went our separate ways. I spent the evening with some colleagues and did not connect with Patty again until the end of the night. After the event, we drove back to Patty's home. Marco greeted us at the door, and after speaking with him for just a short amount of time, I perceived he was a grounded, gentle, compassionate, and trusting man. Marco explained that he was tired, offered his apologies, and went to bed. Patty suggested that I get into some comfortable clothes and join her in what she called the meditation room. The room was dark, illuminated only by candles. We sat on a love seat positioned about 4 feet in front of a roaring fire, where the flames seemed to dance with excitement at my arrival and anticipation of what lay ahead. Patty began the evening by gently asking about Jeannine, her illness, and death. At one point, Patty stated with confidence and conviction that Jeannine was present with us. One of the first messages I recall Patty communicating from Jeannine was in response to my regret for having told many people in my support circle intimate details of her illness. I told Patty that I was so distraught over the thought of losing her that I needed to frequently talk about it. I needed to wrap my head around what was happening with my daughter. Patty told me that Jeannine said to let it go. She understood why I needed to share my story. The message comforted me for sure, but what got my attention is that it was delivered as if Jeannine was actually physically present. In my 7+ years since her death, disclosures about communication from the other side would at times pique my curiosity. It now appeared that events beyond my control were about to unfold. Patty disclosed that she felt my daughter's presence prior to the Beyond Words conference, sharing an experience that occurred on September 3rd, a week after we spoke. While both she and her husband were driving along Route 17, a brilliant rainbow appeared. Marco was in awe of how the rainbow gleamed with such intensity and how it stretched across the roadway in front of them. Pulling over to the side of the road, he insisted Pat video the magnificence of this rainbow. Patty explained that she heard an inner voice saying, "I need you to talk to my father." Upon hearing those words, she remembered our conversation about the double rainbow and felt my daughter Jeannine had a need to bring us together. In the darkness of the room, Patty sat with a forward lean and her legs crossed, the exact mannerisms of Jeannine, and asked, "Why don't you listen to music anymore?" I immediately responded, "Because when you died, the joy went out of my life." Her reply was, "You should listen to music because of the joy it brought us." My response was effortless and automatic. I had no doubt that I was speaking directly to Jeannine. This was a new perspective for me because in the early stages of grief, memories of Jeannine's life were stark reminders of her physical absence. However, after Jeannine's suggestion, I began to consider that I could choose to feel joy when reliving memories of her life, by learning to manage and release the pain. In retrospect, this was the beginning of a new relationship with my daughter, transcending the boundaries of the physical world. Our conversation continued, filled with more reflections, wisdom, and playfulness. Patty was quick with her wit, full of excitement and joy. The pain of my loss diminished as Jeannine's presence became more and more evident to me. I was smiling from ear to ear. Jeannine was asking questions, jarring my memory and bringing me back to the relationship we had when she was younger. Her mischievous and teasing manner inspired a whole different energy about me. Patty observed that I smiled and had a glimmer in my eye when I talked about Jeannine. Without even knowing me, Patty pointed out that I hadn't smiled in a long time, and when I did, it was only at the mention of Jeannine's name. I told her that I found it hard to smile after Jeannine passed. Through Patty, Jeannine communicated that she was proud of my work as a bereaved dad and thrilled that I was helping others in the process. She also wanted to remind me that I could be a wiser elder to my sons Dan and Matt. The insights being shared intrigued me. I was beginning to realize that I could possibly view my life from a whole new perspective. Patty suggested that my life's purpose was being fulfilled because of the physical absence of my daughter. It was also mentioned that everyone else in my life took a backseat to that work I did in memory of Jeannine. What I heard during that weekend resonated so deeply that I immediately called my two sons, Dan and Matt, and made plans to connect with both of them upon my return home. I vowed that I no longer would allow my sons to take a backseat to my role as a grieving father. If anything, they would enrich my life, bringing me joy in the midst of the sadness that I was experiencing after Jeannine's death. I believe that Jeannine wanted to convince me that this experience was in fact very real, since she knew what a skeptic I could be. I truly felt the energy of our father-daughter connection through Patty. It was interesting to me that in one moment I would be having conversations with Patty, and in the next moment I would be speaking directly with Jeannine. Throughout the evening, I was visibly shivering and was in need of blankets to warm me. It was getting late, and after a while I could not speak clearly. It was at that point, through Patty, Jeannine explained that it was time to end the evening. With tears flowing, she communicated, "I love you so much," and hugged me while burying her head on my shoulder, much like she did in life. That beautiful, precious moment reflected the spontaneous nature of my daughter, giving absolute validation that this experience was not a figment of my imagination. Patty suggested that I remain on the couch for as long as necessary. After resting for a bit, I opened my eyes to see a shadow of an unrecognizable face with arms outstretched in a gesture of love. Eventually, at 3:25 a.m. on November 12, 2010, I dragged myself to bed, feeling drained yet fulfilled and in awe of the entire experience. I got up at about 8 in the morning and spoke with Marco briefly before he left for work. Patty showed me where everything was in her kitchen the day before and cheerfully told me to make myself at home. I made some coffee and decided to take this quiet time to reflect on all that happened the night before. I truly felt I was on the threshold of a completely new chapter in my life. Soon after, Patty came out of her bedroom in hostess mode, cheerfully asking what I wanted for breakfast. I told her oatmeal sounds great. She handed me the oatmeal container and said, "Here you go, help yourself." I was measuring out each scoop, being very careful not to spill any on the counter. I suddenly detected frown on Patty's face, reminiscent of Jeannine's, as she walked swiftly towards me, sternly saying, "Give me that." She snatched the container out of my hand and poured the oatmeal in my bowl. As my jaw dropped, she started to giggle. In a blink of an eye, Patty's sensitive and caring personality quickly reappeared, and she began apologizing profusely, stating she never treats a guest in that manner. I started laughing and told her that no apology was necessary. I knew it was Jeannine shenanigans, since we shared many similar interactions when she was alive. Once again, my daughter presented herself to me, validating the reality of the previous evening. Following breakfast, Patty invited me back into her meditation room with the intention of sharing more of her knowledge of spiritual practices. She placed 2 decks of cards in front of me, one blue and one orange. These cards are interrelated to books written by Native American writers Jamie Sams and David Carson. She asked me which set of cards I felt drawn to. I picked the orange deck. Patty instructed me to shuffle the cards, then spread them out in front of me, face down. With guidance, she had me call on Jeannine to help choose the card that would provide the most wisdom and meaning at this juncture of my life. I was drawn to the Field of Plenty card. The teachings of this card introduces several aspects of Native American culture. One component revealed: if the Field of Plenty card has appeared, you are being assured that what you need at this time is manifesting. Your needs will be met. Show great mystery, the trust you have in your process, dropping any doubt, becoming childlike. The card I selected confirmed for me I was getting what I asked for, insight of the experiences, not only from this weekend, but including my trip to Old Forge back in September. I had simply wanted to engage in an advanced spiritual conversation that would increase my understanding regarding my current situation as a bereaved parent. My expectations were greatly exceeded. Patty and Jeannine introduced me to a whole new perspective, a new way of life where I could find some measure of peace and clarity that I did not deem possible. However, there was more for me to learn about myself through Native American teachings. Later that evening, Patty brought out the blue deck of cards called medicine cards. She placed them on the table and asked that I select one using the same manner I had done earlier in the day. Jamie Sams and David Carson explained the purpose of animal medicine. When you call upon the power of an animal, you're asking to be drawn into complete harmony with the strengths of that creature's essence. Gaining understanding from these brothers and sisters is a healing process and must be approached with humility and intuitiveness. I revealed the card I was drawn to, the deer card whose medicine teaches gentleness to self and others. Through reflection and subsequent discussions with Patty, she helped me become fully aware of my struggles with kindness and gentleness, relating to not only myself but to others. Realizing it all began during Jeannine's illness and continued after her death. I routinely blame myself for not being able to protect her from an incurable illness. After all, a parent's role is to protect her child from harm and from the nefarious influences of the world. I felt I failed miserably as her father and protector. With Patty's guidance, I found that I could use the teachings of deer medicine to release myself from the guilt of not saving her from so an incurable disease. I could not prevent what would be Jeannine's ultimate destiny, as well as mine. I was reminded of this over the course of the next couple of days by unseen forces of the universe. Sunday morning, prior to my departure from Long Island, Patty drove me to another of her special places, the Fire Island Lighthouse at Robert Moses State Park. As we drove toward the lighthouse, 3 deer crossed the road directly in front of us. Then on my drive home from airport, while on the New York State Thruway, I saw 3 deer huddled in a gully. Those unseen forces of the universe were at work, as deer seemed to be everywhere. Their presence served as a source of encouragement and reinforcement. It became apparent I needed to modify my thinking, allow the kinder, gentler version of myself to emerge, and forgive myself for not protecting Jeannine from cancer. During our last evening together, Patty played a song called Testify to Love. Towards the end of the song, she suddenly came up from behind, hugged me and whispered, "You're going to be okay." I thanked Patty, and much to my surprise, the words that I heard next were, "It's Jeannine, you jerk." The seemingly disrespectful comment was further evidence of Jeannine's personality and the playfulness that she embodied during her time on Earth. I smiled and told her that I loved her and will always love her. Jeannine replied that she loved me too, and then she said her farewell, affirming that Patty's body was getting tired. The hug was familiar. It was identical to one that I received in a dream about a faceless young female brunette the Sunday morning after the Beyond Word conference. My dream was so vivid that I could still feel the nurturing essence of the hug as I awoke. I immediately felt that Jeannine was the faceless young brunette in my dream. It became apparent through the many encounters of the weekend that I could experience life without having to control it. In my work, and to an extent, my personal life, I had to have a plan for everything. I took comfort in control. It kept me safe and put some order to the emotional chaos that defined my existence after Jeannine died. However, with Patty's guidance, I was able to surrender control and embrace all of the moments as they happened. As one who believes in the science of psychology and evidence-based practice, this was a novel experience. Though I was unaware of objective data to validate my experiences, with Jeannine, I knew in my heart it was real. I began to now entertain the possibility that unseen, yet serendipitous phenomenon could add to our misunderstanding of human behavior. The shift in my mood and energy made it crystal clear. Trevor Noah writes in his book, Born a Crime, that the highest rung of what's possible is far beyond the world you can see. The question that remained was, could I integrate the world of psychology and spirituality without abandoning my core beliefs? Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with me. If this brought you peace, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it with someone who might need a little stillness too. Until next time, keep listening inward.